An epic journey, a big investment, a marathon or an Ironman race, a relationship. All of these things and more have one major requirement: faith. Anything challenging, anything risky, anything new requires faith. One of the women I volunteer with at our organic farm, she knows nothing about cooking. There's a lot of vegetables in our farm share that are challenging and they're new to her, but I give her a lot of credit. She's not afraid to ask questions, like, what is that? When she sees a Jerusalem artichoke that the farmer calls a fartichoke, just so you know, they're dangerous. She'll ask, what does it taste like? Or how do you cook it? Now, most of our discussions that we have as we're processing the carrots and the beets and the turnips and everything that's coming through, most of our conversations have to do with cooking. And kale was her biggest challenge. She kept trying, but she just didn't like it. She didn't like it raw. She didn't like it the way she cooked it until I gave her some of the soup that I make that has kale in it, and she loved it. Now the thing is, she doesn't take very many risks in the kitchen. She doesn't have a lot of faith in her abilities. But the step-by-step recipe I gave her for the soup helped. And this past week, she was so excited when she told me her soup was delicious. Are you adventurous in the kitchen? Or in your vocation? In your music? Or in your pastime? But where, I would ask, in your life do you hesitate? Where do you not have a lot of confidence or faith in yourself? This parable of the talents that we've heard twice already this morning, it's so often lifted up as a model for financial support of the church. It is the season of generosity, but I don't think that that is what this parable is about. I would argue that this parable is telling us that we need to have confidence in God, because God gives to us with abandon. We have an abundance in our lives that we didn't have to earn. So having that confidence in an abundantly giving and loving God, I think that that could be called faith. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a night we once had at church that might help illustrate this parable in a new light. Now, anyone who has taught church school or worked with youth groups probably could say they've had an experience like this. One of our youth groups did a cupcake fundraiser. I think it was around Christmas time. And we got all of the ingredients donated. Cake mixes, frostings, toppings, you name it. And only a couple of the young people had ever baked anything, and they were the girls. And yet, all of them, I think we had 16 or 17 youth in the kitchen, and they all mixed the batters and they filled cupcake pans with great enthusiasm and excitement. Even the boys got in on all the fun, but that was nothing compared to when the cupcakes were cooled and the decorating began. Chocolate frosting was topped with cinnamon Red Hots. We had white icings with M&Ms, Swedish Fish, and Skittles. You name it, they made it. And the final products were all laid out and festive with color that would be for sale the next morning. And everybody got to pick a cupcake of their own to eat. And most of them chose somebody else's. They didn't make one for themselves. And you know what? No one said, ew, this is disgusting. No one criticized anybody else. They were so excited and delighted with the outcome and each other. Even cleanup was fun and easy, although I think that had a little bit to do with the sugar. So So why was that one evening so successful? How come no one showed any fear of making a mistake? Wouldn't it be great if the rest of life was like that? Excitement and cooperation and going at it with abandon and gusto. How could we bring that sort of thing about into our daily lives and into our world? I think that Jesus was trying to show us that we should see our lives the way the youth approached our great cupcake caper in that parable. Because if you look at it this way, the kitchen counter held enough, more than enough, ingredients for everyone to use, and for us in particular. Or maybe we could look at it by seeing the kitchen, realizing it's not ours, not the oven, not the mixing spoons, not the baking pans. So maybe we can be a little bit more free with experimenting and doing things. Maybe we recognize the truth that our whole world doesn't really belong to us at all, and that God has given us the freedom and the wisdom and the creativity. God has given us all that we need to do new and sometimes risky things with these amazing gifts that we have. And maybe, if I look at that youth group, people coming from all over the place, maybe we're supposed to do these things, live together and experiment and create in community. You know, that night, young people, some of whom had never worked with each other before, they mixed and they poured and they baked and they decorated without one scrabble or argument. Taking the risk of doing something new and different allowed them to experiment. Being supervised, knowing that someone was watching over them, it wasn't really a risk or a scary risk at all. And I think that says something about the parable. That we are also invited to risk and grow with all that God has given us. In the parable, there was someone who was a master, and that was the same in our kitchen. We had an experienced cook who could keep an eye out for things when things were done and when the timing was done in the baking. That person could demonstrate the techniques when they were needed, and it's the same in our lives. God is there, giving each one of us the wisdom to put to use all that we've been given, all of our abilities, all the things that we do in our work, things that we can do with what we have, things that we can do and be in community. So instead of being a financial message, I think this parable is about having faith in yourself, to explore with wisdom what God has blessed you with, to develop your abilities, your skills. Don't let them get rusty. I'm taking that message to heart. I'm like, I haven't picked up my bagpipes in 2 years. I think I need to start playing again. Maybe you don't have bagpipes at home, but there's something in your life that maybe you've let go. And it's going to be so rusty at some point, you may not be able to use it. God doesn't want us to hide away who we are, what we have, like the intimidated servant did. God doesn't want to be in a timid, fearful relationship with us. God wants us to be open ourselves with abandon to the abundant grace and blessing that's always available to us. And when we do that, our lives, our church, our world will all be for the better, for the blessing of you.